Hello and welcome to episode 253 of the Paint All the Minis podcast. We put the show together so you can have something to listen to whilst you are sitting at your desk and painting miniatures of any scale, genre or game. Our aim is to have a relaxed and genuine conversation with someone who's as involved in the hobby as you are from any level, top to bottom, because we've all got our own individual and unique stories. So sit at your hobby desk, paint your models, listen to the chat. We really do hope that you enjoy the content. This week I talked to Mr. Scott Wainwright, the creator of the Brutality family of rule sets, and he also has a YouTube channel called Let's Talk Tabletop. Let's Talk Tabletop is a reflective and philosophic inquiry into our hobby, and Brutality rule sets give you the ability to play lots of genres with similar rule sets and guiding principles. It's always great to talk to a creative person about their mentality and their ethos, and Scott was no exception here. I won't ruin or spoil any of the chat by signposting it here, but we hope that you really enjoy this show. And I must thank Scott for coming on and giving up an hour of his consciousness to chat with us. It's always a really interesting conversation when you speak to somebody who's got set principles and things like that. It was great hearing his story about how rule writing and rule adaptation first came to being, and also hearing his mentality behind the Brutality skirmish game, and then also the Brutality family of rule sets, and also the lore in Brutality, the lore idea. I've just said I won't signpost all the chat, but I'm just gone on to do that. But yeah, there's certain salient points that come out during the show which are pretty interesting, and it's always great to hear about those things. If you want to email us, you can email paintalltheminis@gmail.com if you want to chat to me for any reason at all. You can come and join our Discord server. There's a link to the Discord server in the podcast description. You can come and join the Facebook group, or you can catch us on Blue Sky. Make sure that you share the show if you're interested. If you're a Brutality fan or you know a Brutality fan, yeah, please share this around, because other people might appreciate hearing a little bit more from the person that created the rule sets that you enjoy. Or also, if you think that Brutality might be something that you're interested in, you can swing by and you can go and figure some more about it. And then also, if you just think it's an interesting conversation, share it around and interact with us too. If there's certain things that Scott said or certain things that came up in the conversation, we have a dedicated section on the Discord server for that, where you can talk about specific things. You can ask more questions and different bits and bobs. So yeah, this whole hobby, this whole deal is just about us interacting, so make sure that you do. That's pretty much enough of the pre-ramble. Got a few things to talk about in the post-ramble, so stick around for that if you are so inclined. But that's enough. Let's go.
Paint all the minis. Paint all the minis that you can. And when you paint your minis, listen to that podcast with Dan Adams, that is.
There once was a podcasting man with a mic and a paintbrush in hand. He'd share a few words with the wargaming nerds while we paint all the minis with Dan. And after we've heard the intro, it's time for the call to let's go! And we'd strike up the band, the best theme tune in Podland, with a ripping good bluegrass banjo. So tell us about you, Dan would say, in a friendly, inquisitive way. And he'd ask what was good, and the sights and the food that we'd get if we went round their way. So tell us where your hobby began, asks the ever-inquisitive Dan. And we hear from each guest their hobby, life's quest, and our host responds, yeah, that's cool, man. And what have you been up to, he'll say. Are there any great games that you've played? Or what about paints? Or the minis you rate? Where can we find you these days? And after a right thorough chat, all about all of this and all that, all the minis are painted, and the guest's gone and fainted, but the episode still needs its hat. So on to the post-ramble, where you might get a bit of a sample about what's coming soon, and all the Discord crowd news, although it's sometimes a bit of a shambles.
So hey, I am here with Mr. Scott Wainwright. How's it going, Scott?
Very nice. Thank you for having me on the show.
Nice. The big reason you're on the show is because your second name, your family name, Wainwright. So I grew up in Northern England, and there was a gentleman called Wainwright, and what he used to do is he used to go up into the hills and mountains and walk. And then this was back before like walking routes were really official. So he used to make walking routes, and he put them into books and sold the books as like little guides. And he was awesome because what he always used to do is he used to do exactly the same thing. He used to get the train to a certain point, then he started his walk from the train, and then when he was on his way home, he would always get fish and chips. And so I did a lot of Wainwright walks when I was a kid. And also my favorite English ale is called Wainwright as well. So there you go. So I've got instant positive feelings from you, Scott.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that it's. I didn't know my reputation preceded me, even if it wasn't me.
So whereabouts in the U.S. do you hail from?
Maryland, which would be the middle Atlantic shoreline of U.S.
Nice. So everyone, this is always a good question when this sort of stuff pops up. I remember as a kid, like, eating cookies that were called Maryland cookies. So is that a thing where you are, or is that just something like an English company made and to make it sound fancy? Is Maryland renowned for its cookies, and is the Maryland Cookies Company in Maryland?
No, I've actually never heard of Maryland cookies. Now, I do know there's a pseudo-local company that's still pretty small. It's not like, Nabisco or anything, called Burger Cookies. Have you ever heard of those?
No, never heard of those ones, no.
Okay, so those are kind of a local-ish thing, but Maryland is usually known for crabs, for its Chesapeake Bay crabs.
Nice.
Crab soup, stuff like that.
Nice. What do you like about where you live?
I like that we get all the seasons. We do have a winter, we do have a spring, summer, fall, all that, and I like all of that. I would hate to live somewhere that was always hot or always cold, Yeah. So I like especially the leaves changing. I love the fall, so that's my favorite season.
Nice. So we're obviously talking about a certain hobby, but outside of the obvious hobby that we're going to talk about in a little bit, do you have any other hobbies outside?
Oh, you know what? An interesting topic is that we have a rabbit farm, believe it or not.
Nice.
We've got like 60 rabbits at this point. So
what, just like a personal hobby rabbit farm like that you just keep?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and we've got rabbits, and we've also got chickens now. We've got a bunch of chickens as well. So it's what they call a hobby farm. It's not like a 60-acre farm. It's just you having a little farm on your backyard. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
The biggest question is like, why and how did that happen? Did you just go out and buy 60 rabbits at one point, or do you just kind of find one on the way home and then it just suddenly there was 60?
So the chickens we bought because my wife wanted to raise chickens for some reason, but the rabbits is a very odd story. My neighbor had rabbits and he didn't want them anymore. And we said, oh, well, we might think about getting them from you. And the next thing we know, he backs his pickup into our front yard and pushes 20 rabbits out in our front yard and drives off.
Drives off.
So that's how we got rabbits.
And then he moved
no
house
phone
as well.
call, nothing.
You never know where. That's awesome. So that's great. I saw a while ago that someone had something similar, but with guinea pigs, and I was just transfixed because it was like a herd of these guinea pigs that you should like come out of the shed in the morning and just mooch around. So how much upkeep does that take?
Oh, it's not too bad. They eat pellets, which are like grass pellets, and then you got to feed them and water them in the morning and at night. But other than that, although there's a lot of, we've built a bunch of pens, and they've got like bedding. You put hay down for bedding, and you got to replace that every couple months. So it's a bit of work, but like the day to day is just feeding and giving them water. So it's not so bad.
That's amazing, man.
But
that's so cool.
The rabbits are very, very pleasant to be around. They lay in the sun. They snuggle together. You can pick them up and pet them. And me and my family, we read a lot. So on pretty days, we'll sit out there with the rabbits in chairs and we'll read. And, the rabbits come up to you and whatever. So we also have my daughters like to show they pick a couple rabbits every year and show them at the state fair or the county fair. And it's like an agricultural thing. Like you try to have the most textbook perfect patterns in their fur and things like that. So
that's amazing, mate. That's so cool. That's super cool. I could talk about that more. But we're here to talk about the hobby. We should just do a secondary podcast just talking about animal husbandry and showing. That'd be really cool, about how you get those patterns and all that kind of stuff. What's the most desirable pattern? But anyway, so we're not just here to talk about rabbits and kind of cookies that maybe don't exist in Maryland. We're here to talk about our tabletop hobby. So before we go any further, we obviously mentioned you in the introduction, so people know your name and people have clicked on the show. But tell us about what you do, which is over and above just playing games yourself. What have you created? What have you produced that people might know?
So my first product was Brutality Skirmish War Game, and that came out in June of 2020. And since then, I've published 8 books. So we have a total of 8 books between supplements and rules adaptations to that. So if you want to run down of just briefly what Brutality Skirmish War Game is, it's a model agnostic system, and there's a lot of key differences that a lot of skirmish games don't allow you to do. So it's like a mix between an RPG and a skirmish game. For instance, a lot of times, like in campaigns, like Kill Team or whatever, you might take, if your guy dies, then you roll on a chart to see if he gets an injury or if he really died or whatever. In my game, injuries are real time. So every time you take a damage, you have to roll on an injury table. And so all of a sudden you might have a broken hand and now you don't fight as well or whatever. You could be blinded or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those games where you cannot memorize your stat sheet because it's constantly changing. So every time you have to go look over and something, most games don't have, like Warhammer, the stats are always the same. So once you memorize that, that's the way it is. And then from there, I did a couple supplements for Brutality, which were just expansions to the rules and things. And then my first adaptation of the rules was Brutal Space, which I always try to do something very different from what I see other people do. It's kind of like a personal creative challenge. Mm-hmm. And Brutal Space allows you to play fleet battles and ground battles simultaneously, mm-hmm. using essentially 90% the same rules. So they're just applied differently. You build your ships differently than your ground forces, but it's really neat because you only activate one model, like either on the space map or on the ground map at a time.
Okay. Nice.
So if I keep activating ships in the fleet map, then that would give you an advantage on the ground map because you can keep activating. It's really cool.
Nice.
And then I published Brutal Epic, which is 6mm mech, kaiju, and superheroes. And again, it's about 90% the same rules as Brutality, but it's just applied differently. It's similar to the spaceship battle character creation. Mm-hmm. And then there's also superheroes in that. And then just this November of 2024, just recently, I released Mass Brutality, which is essentially your mass scale, like your Warhammer Kings of War scale Brutality. Mm-hmm. And again, you have complete freedom. You can play sci-fi versus fantasy. You can play modern versus historical, whatever you want. And the system and the lore supports all of that. So
that's awesome. That's really cool, man. Yep. That's awesome. That's a really good placeholder, and we can kind of go back and we can kind of talk about that in a little bit more detail a little bit later. But the kind of story about how you got here is interesting because everyone's got their own unique view on different things, and everyone's got your own unique path. But just before we go back and talk about how you first started within the hobby. What do you like about writing rules? Because even just listening to you there, you seem passionate and enthusiastic about what you do, and you've taken it in different directions. So if we just talk specifically just about rule writing, what do you enjoy about rule writing? What's the biggest thing that stands out about the motivation to do it?
Well, it definitely is my passion. I do it in all of my free time when I'm not playing games or spending time with the family. Currently, I've got the biggest project I've ever worked on. I'm working on right now, and I'm probably 80% done with it. But I'm working 30 hours a week around my work schedule in my free time on this project to get it done. So a little bit of that, that's a little extreme compared to my other projects. But I truly do love game design. I know a lot of game designers are like me. We buy rule books not to play the game, but to just learn the mechanics and see if there's anything that's interesting or sticks out to you or whatever. And so the creative process for me is I don't ever like to copy. Many games seem to follow like a specific format, and they like to do things a specific way because they've seen other games do it. Yeah. Well, my approach to everything is always, okay, I want to do a skirmish game. How would I do it? Ignore everything else I know. Like how does character creation work? How does this, should you get an extra attack when you charge, or should your save be really low, or should you be really tanky? That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I always do my stuff from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And I get a lot of people that say my games are extremely different because it's not usually your typical fare for rules.
Yeah. That's cool, man. That's really interesting. It's a really good mindset. I do that too, and it really annoys people in many ways, especially with building lists for war games. They're like, "Why did you do that?" I don't know. Just did it just to see what happened. And they were like, "It didn't work." I'm like, yeah, okay, they're fine, but what doesn't work is just as good as what does. So let's go right the way back in time then. I don't know how long we're going to go back in time, but you obviously didn't just, vomit these rule sets out, on a Sunday evening and go, "What's that?" "Oh, it's a rule set." You kind of, that there's a lot of experience, a lot of time, a lot of thought will go into the creation of things, right? So how did you first start getting involved in the hobby? Was it through RPGs? Was it through tabletop games? How was it?
Well, when I started designing games was in my teenager years or early teens, and I started making card games and board games for my friend group. Okay. And every week I would have some new idea, and every week they'd come over and we'd play test that. And if they really liked it, then I'd refine it and things like that. But I didn't get into wargaming. I was doing RPGs also at the time, making my own RPGs and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until 2009 that I got into Warhammer. And then I was heavily into that, and I still participate in that now. But I have a convention for wargaming and all that, and Warhammer is a big portion of that. But what spurred me to start making Brutality was actually Kickstarter, and the reason why is because I had Kickstartered so many miniatures games, mm-hmm. and nobody I knew played them. So I'm sure you know how hard it is to get somebody to try a new game.
Yeah.
And so I wanted a rule system that I could use literally anything I wanted. Like I wanted an orc fighting a Jedi or whatever. And so I started making Brutality just for my own purposes. I had no interest or knowledge in self-publishing or any of that. And when I started getting my friends to play test it, they were like, "This is really cool. Like you need to publish this." And I was like, "I don't know, I don't know anything about it," and blah blah blah. I put it off for a while, but it was in development from 2016 all the way to 2019. So I was in development for like 3 years in open beta. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, more and more momentum is building, and people are going, "Yeah, you really need to publish this." So eventually I started working towards publishing it, and then I eventually published it in June of 2020. And but it all spurred because I had all these Kickstarters that nobody else would play with me. So I wanted to just, they're taking up shelf space and stuff, like so.
That's cool. That's a really good story, mate. So you talked there about how as a kid you would make card games and different games for your friendship group. So why? Like what was not right with the games that you had, or were you kind of scrimping around and you didn't want to spend your allowance on games? You could just make one and save your allowance. Like what was the idea behind that?
Well, it started actually. The first games I ever did that when I was a kid. I rewrote Risk before the age of 10. I rewrote Risk because I thought it was a little too cumbersome and a little too complicated, more than it needed to be. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember the actual rules to it anymore. But me and my brother, I rewrote Risk, and then we always just played that version.
Yeah.
And then I got the Dragon Strike board game from Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And again, I thought the rules were kind of more cumbersome and complicated than they needed to be. And I like to think that one of my skills is taking a subject and boiling it down to its core essence, mm-hmm. cut out all the fat, cut out all that. And that's what I did with Dragon Strike. And then that just spurred me on to every game we ever played. I was like, hey, you know what? I don't like this. And I start rewriting it. And now my friends and family all make fun of me because they say that I've never played a game by the correct rules because I change it.
Yeah.
So,
but that's good though.
Yeah.
It's really cool to do that. It's really good to have the agency to do that. Where did that license to do that come from? Was it just a personal thing, or were people encouraging you to do that? To go out and do things. There's a lot of people that are conformist, right? Where it's like, no, you have to play the game, the rules, the rule book. The rule book is like the law. So, like, is that like a family mentality? Was it a sibling mentality? Was it just something that you just felt like you needed to do?
Well, you've mentioned something I never thought of as being a family mentality. My family are pretty independent. My father and I built my house and built my brother's house. I physically built it over 2 years, and built multiple big garages and barns and all sorts of stuff. So rather than hiring someone to build it, we always did that stuff ourselves. And my dad is a mechanic by trade, so he always serviced our vehicles and all. So come to think of it, I guess that is something from the family that I never realized before.
Which is awesome. This is really good. My house would be terrible if it'd be like some sort of Hans Christian Andersen story, like upside down house with all the doors upside down and things. But that's amazing, man. That's super cool. And so you mentioned getting involved in Warhammer about 2009, was it? So why?
Yeah.
Why then? What was happening at that time? Why did you get involved in Warhammer at that time?
Well, it was manifest destiny. No, I don't know. Actually, it was. I still had my high school group left over from high school at the time, but for some reason, I just wanted to meet new people. Like at my regular job, I don't really meet new people that could be friends. I don't work with a lot of people, so I wanted to branch out, and I went to. I was at a real small store, and I'd never heard of Warhammer before. And I saw the 5th edition starter set with orcs and space marines on the shelf. And I was like, hey, what is that? And the guy's like, oh, well, that we've got a club that meets every week if you want to come and see it played and all that. And I got thinking, I'm like, well, I'm a nerd, and these people are probably nerds, so I'll probably get along just fine, And people love to talk about their hobby to new people. Yeah. So I started going, and I went for probably 6 months and didn't have an army. I would just go and ask everybody, oh, what's this army? What's it do? How does it play? And I learned how to play without ever owning an army for half a year. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those people to this day are still my friends and still in my gaming group. And now I actually run the gaming group now, but back then, obviously, I didn't. Mm-hmm. And fortunate for me, my high school group of friends slowly dissipated as people, got married, moved away, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so now just about all my friends are my Warhammer friends. So nice. It was beneficial.
That's awesome. So you mentioned you saw the starter set and then you hung around for a bit of time, but then you started playing. So what faction did you pick up? Why did you pick it up? And what were your formative experiences?
The first army I ever had was Necrons, and I still love Necrons to this day. They're just kind of neat, spooky and kind of weird. Plus, the lore back then was much more dark, with just the different things they would describe them as and whatnot. They were much more mysterious back then. And so I've a couple times I've sold armies and I bought new armies and all that, but the Necrons always stay. I always say, if for no other reason than nostalgia, I'm going to keep the Necrons. So
yeah. What do you like about them?
I think mostly their aesthetic. I just think it's kind of neat, the T100 sort of look to them,
Mm-hmm. I really like Necrons because, like you said, that I purposely don't read too much lore because I don't want my relationship with them to be changed too much by something that someone else has written. So I really like this idea that they've kind of just been entombed, like they were entities and have been entombed in these mechanical bodies, and they just sit and wait. And then there's, I forget the specific unit, but there's a specific unit that actually wears skin, right? They kind of wear skin.
The flayed ones.
Yeah. Skin from fallen enemies. And I kind of think I really like that idea of they're trying to kind of, get back to their organic form or whatever it is they're doing. I think it's really cool. I think that's really nice. And it's just, I think that the unknown part of Necrons, like, what are they doing? Why are they there? What have they been doing in the whole time? That's the biggest aspect of that faction for me, I would say.
I agree.
Nice. Awesome. So people often bump into Warhammer and then start thinking about other games? And so we know the end of this timeline where you started writing Brutality, and you eventually released that. But what does, and we know the start point with Warhammer, but what kind of goes in the middle? So you obviously kind of started playing Warhammer, but then with your mentality as a kid where you change stuff around. When did you start changing stuff around with Warhammer? How did you start changing stuff around with Warhammer? And has it always been Warhammer, or did you start branching out into other rule sets and other games?
Well, it's funny. Yeah, I actually hadn't mentioned yet about changing Warhammer, but in fact I did before I had Brutality. I made a Genestealer cult army using third-party miniatures before they ever released the Codex in 7th edition or whenever it came out. So I was using different rules from different units and hodgepodging a Imperial Guard / Tyrannid / whatever army.
Nice.
So yeah, I had a proxy army of Dark Eldar that were all vampires, and I always started making my own stuff, and that was well before Brutality, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but kind of like what you just said about you want it to be your own. You want to have your own experience with something instead of necessarily being told how it is. Mm-hmm. That was always my take too. Like to this day, I don't play named characters. I want my hero to be a nameless person so I can, I guess imprint on them or whatever. I want to tell some new story. I don't want it to just be, Marnius Calgar or some named person. I just never like that. So.
That's cool. That's awesome. So, for me, that's why wargaming is awesome. Having those relationships, creating those relationships, naming your own character, having your own complete way, because we can both have the same faction, but you can have a totally different relationship and a totally different experience. And that's what I love about the hobby, how we can both paint the same model, but we've taken the arms and legs and put them on in different places in different ways, and they're called different things, and they're painted in a different color, and that's a form of connection too. So if we ever bump into each other and we see that we have the same guy but it looks a little bit different and it's painted a little bit different, that's a point of connection. So you can say, what did you do? I got this piece from there and I did that. Oh, brilliant, I did that and that and that. And tell me about what your guys did. We had this siege game one time and he fell off the wall but he was still okay, and then he killed 20 goblins. Brilliant. It's that different experience around the same kind of thing is cool. There's a lot of coalescence around that. That's awesome, man. So did you ever start getting involved in other games before you started writing? Did you play? Some people go into World War II. Some people go into fantasy. What did you extend into?
So I was into 40K first, and I still participate in that. But I got into Malifaux for quite some time, for a couple years. Uh-huh. And then I've always loved spaceship fleet battles. Like I just love that, either naval battles or spaceship. And so we got into Firestorm Armada. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of the. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how much they're in business anymore, but because I know they got bought up by another company. But my problem again with it is that it was, if you wanted to play a standard game, it was 3 to 4 hours.
Yes.
And my games play much quicker because I try to boil it down to the concentrate of what's fun and not the granularity. So that's I got into Firestorm Armada, and I was also playing Malifaux. But again, even like I mentioned, the Kickstarter finding opponents, out of all my gaming group, I had one player that would play Firestorm Armada with me, and I had another one player that would play Malifaux. So, so then the problem with keeping up with those is if you only play them 4 times a year, well, then practically every game's a demo,
Yeah, you don't get the time to kind of have that deep dive into it. What was the reasons for people being reluctant? Because I have the same experience, but when you would say, hey, you guys ever want to play Malifaux? Or hey, you guys, you want to play Zombicide or whatever it is you picked up on Kickstarter? Like, what would be the friction? What would be the barrier?
I mean, I think it doesn't have to be an expensive hobby, but I think a lot of cases, especially if you're talking about Warhammer, it's an expensive hobby. And, there's only so much time in the day. There's only so much money to go around. So people want the sure thing. If I'm going to invest my time and money in this, I want to make sure I have opponents, and I want to maximize the number of opponents. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, I think that's why Warhammer stays on top, despite... Mm-hmm. Snafus and things in the past and their ever increasing prices, is that it's kind of like that ham sandwich, right? It's not great, it's not terrible, but it's reliable and it's always there, and you know what to expect because it's a ham sandwich, you know?
Exactly right. I think you've nailed it there. And then, again, this is what makes this hobby amazing, is that I kind of say a similar thing. Not that we're both right, but, it's just our opinion. But I kind of call Warhammer very similar to McDonald's, not necessarily the pricing. But, it's like you know what to expect, you know what it is. And there's not too many people, and I'm not poo-pooing anything, but there's not too many people that I bump into that go, Warhammer's just such a tight rule set. It's just a really great rule set. A lot of people are like, yeah. And I say, well, why though? And they go, because if I want to play, I can play. Whereas if I got this, one of my favorite games that I never play is called Conquest: Last Argument of Kings, and it's a really good tabletop fantasy battle game. Just no one's ever heard of it, which is such a shame because it's such a great game and it's got such great rules, right? But yeah, same thing. That's cool, man. That's interesting. That's really, really good. So let's start talking about Brutality then. So what was that did you have like a eureka moment, or did you have is there a very vivid like day or hour where you just sat down like with a quill and some parchment and go Brutality? Like, what was the very first time that you actually started writing something down?
Oh, I don't know, because I was in open beta from 2016 to 2019, so I had the rules completely for free. Everything that was available was free on the Facebook page, and at that time, and we still have a free version of the rules now, but it's not obviously the whole book, and so it was such a slow, gradual process. A lot of it was like handwritten in a notebook, and then later it has to be transferred to a computer. So it was a very slow process over many, many years, and I would eventually, think of, oh, wouldn't this be cool? And then I would add it and all that. So, and you're talking,
was it just because you thought that? Not in an arrogant way, but did you think I could do that better, or I could make that better for me? Like, where was the kind of like the motivation for it coming from? Was it a frustration that you wanted to do something better, that things went unclear? Like, was it just an expression that you needed to get out anyway? Like, what was forming the motivation to do it, to put it in that note?
Again, with me rewriting rules, what it usually came down to is I find a lot of rule sets to be tedious. And I know some people love that granularity and love that, I have 17 steps on my turn that I have to complete. But for me, I want the story. I want the result. I want the action. And I also really like tactics, like on the board tactics. I'm not so much a list person. I'm more of a on the ground tactic person. Yeah. So even when I play Warhammer, I literally throw models on the board with no synergy, intentional synergy. Just, hey, I haven't played this in a while and I just painted this and blah, blah, blah. And I try to use the things I brought to the very best of my ability. Yeah. So that's why I never look up a list, and I have no eye for synergies intentionally. I just want to, it's like a challenge to use it the best I can, even though it's probably not optimal. Yeah. And Brutality is very much like that. There's a lot of core rules for Brutality, and this extends to all my games, because once you learn one of them, 90% of the others. It's just applied differently. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted to do. So it was really, really easy, but anyway, I'm somewhat losing my train of thought.
No, it's good. We're talking about the motivation to do stuff. So the motivation to write rules for you was because you wanted to strip it all back and make it easier and simpler. That mindset is awesome. A gentleman, Alessio Cavatori, he wrote Bolt Action. He kind of says the same thing in many ways. He says that I want to spend more time thinking about what to do with my figures on the board, not spending a whole bunch of time in a rule book and thinking, what can these guys do? And that's a very different proposition, because you're still spending the same amount of runtime, you're still spending the same amount of thought, but you're just looking at a table and going, how can I make the most of this? When should I activate those guys? How should I activate those guys? And that to me is a much better value proposition. If you think about chess, you can pick up what a pawn does or what a bishop does very, very quickly, but choosing what to do with them is significantly more interesting to me than just thinking, what does that bishop do again? You can move what? Diagonally? Okay, cool. All right, what does that guy do? A castle? Castles can't move. Okay, but that goes straight. Okay. So it's like, and you seem to have the same mindset, right?
Yeah, and to me, it's just cutting out all the extraneous things that don't matter. And to me, that's we own dozens and dozens of board games. My family plays board games a lot together, and every single one of them has a lined sheet of paper with rules adjustments that I've made. And we play by these rules adjustments, and almost every time, my kids way better prefer my version because it's just, cuts some things out. And a lot of times I look at rules and I go, why was this even included? You've got a 1/6 chance of something maybe happening. Like, it's just a, waste of time kind of.
It's great because you could go to somebody else's house and they'd have a lined sheet of paper and it'd be completely different, and that's what makes it cool, right? Does that kind of make sense? There's no. It's weird. I was speaking to my wife about this just last night. We were talking about something being the norm. I was spelling. One of my young daughters is learning to spell, and she spelled things in different ways, and she was like, "You've not spelt it right," and then I kind of was like, "There's no such thing as spelling it right." There is no way to spell it right. There's an generally accepted way, but that's not the right way. It's just a way to do it. And sort of like I really enjoy accents and dialects, and I don't want to see those go away because I think the difference of how we interact with something is what makes it amazing. So hearing a Scottish accent or a Liverpudlian Scouser accent or a Cockney accent, those are the different accents in England. That's what makes it amazing. How you can have people that speak in English but speaking English in a wildly different way. That's what makes the world a rich tapestry, right? If everyone just does exactly the same thing, it's boring. Now, when you go into tournaments, yeah, of course, if you're doing a tournament play, so if you're on a Risk tournament, right, or a Monopoly tournament, it'd be mayhem if there was no, we're going to play my house rules here. That'd be absolute mayhem. So generally speaking, sometimes things need to be standardized. But if you standardize everything, it does get a bit boring, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the truth. And keeping in line with that, I'm always big on tradition, like family traditions. And just however silly it might be, for holidays you do this, or for birthdays you do this, or whatever. And I think that's so cool. Like you said, it's your cultural identity. It's your whatever. It makes you and your family or your country or whatever unique. And I think that's pretty cool too.
That's awesome. So brutality. If something is brutal, if something has brute force, it means that it doesn't accept anything else. It just goes ahead and does it with no thought to anybody else. It's not delicate. It's not thought out. It just is. So why that word for your games?
Well, not only are there a lot of injuries, like I said, when you lose hit points, you take injuries, but also your people are very fragile. So this is an extremely tactical game in all of its iterations because you are not durable. Most people play Warhammer and you've got a 4 out of 6 chance of saving it on a 3-up, right? A 66% chance. Well, my base save for all of my units is a 20% chance. Now, there are, there's cover modifiers and things like that, and there's a model abilities and powers and things like you can definitely manipulate that save to be better. But, without any other modifications whatsoever, you have a 20% chance to save something. And that really requires you to plan and strategize and move in the proper positioning and all of that. I don't like in games where, like I'll mention Warhammer because that's the elephant in the room, I guess. But most people know that as well. A unit just does something, and there's usually no condition behind it. Whereas a lot of my stuff, my core mechanics, you have a height benefit. If you're higher than your opponent and you charge them or you shoot them, you get benefits for that. If you're in their back 180 rear arc, you get bonuses for that. If you have an ally nearby, you get bonuses for that. Like there's much of it is situational and positional. And I like that because it makes you think about it and makes you make good choices. And if you don't, and you get your caught with your pants down, your character's dead. And that's, so it's very brutal.
So some people say that when they create rules and when they create things, it's real. So you talk there about a height advantage. That would make sense. If I'm on top of a roof, looking down on you, trying to get the jump on you, that I would feel like I would have an advantage there realistically if we were realistically fighting. Some people just kind of use the rule of cool and use abstract ideas where it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to do that because it sounds good. How do you form those rules decisions? Are they based in realism, in real environments that you envisage, or is it, just what you think is interesting or good?
Yeah, I try to. I think I try for realism. Obviously there's things that are boiled down and simplified just for the ease of use. But like for instance, if you're charging from 3 inches above them, or if you are shooting from 3 inches above them, you reroll to hit. And the idea is that obviously if you have a higher vantage point, you can shoot them better. But also if you're literally jumping off a higher elevation, it's going to be hard to miss them. So you can reroll to hit. And all those benefits apply to ranged and melee combat. So if you start your charge in their rear arc, you're 20% higher to hit in melee, or if you're shooting from their rear arc, you get 20% higher to hit them in ranged. So it's all equivalent. So I like to think that's realism.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's start talking in detail about let's talk about the initial Brutality. So skirmish game, correct? And talk to us about how, if we were to open a book, if we were to be playing our first game together, how does it look? What's the size of the table? What are the factions? You mentioned it's mini agnostic, but how are the forces tied together? Talk to us about how the game would play out and how our list would play out.
Okay, so first off, you typically have about 5 models. Now, there is a point system, but again, I don't care for very granular points. So basic models are 1 point, and then if you upgrade them to a specific, let's say an archetype is essentially what they are. If you upgrade them, they're 1.5 points. So a typical game is 7 points. So if you're doing the maximum number of people upgraded, you would have 4 upgraded and 1 not. That would be 7 points. Yep. Or I could take 7 basic people. So you could have 5, but they're better than mine. And I can take 7, and they're worse. That's basically the thing. And it's I go, you go. So I activate 1 model, you activate 1 model. I activate 1 model, and we continue until that end of the round. The way my system is different from most things is that most games want to tell you a flintlock pistol does this, a shotgun does this, a sniper rifle does this, and they want to spell out exactly what things do. Actually, what they are is what they want to spell out. But my system, to make it completely model agnostic, whereas you can be playing a ghost or an orc or a Star Trek person or whatever, it's what they do. So for instance, if you had a ranged model that shoots out splinters because it's a dryad, you might want to make it ranged, and you might want to give it the shredder upgrade because it does double wound chart rolls when it damages someone. But a shredder is also commonly used for a machine gun or a minigun because it unleashes attacks. Or let's say you have a wizard that sends bees. He's like a druid and he sends a swarm of bees. You might also make him a shredder. Now, there are other layers of changing things on these characters. They wouldn't all be identical, those 3 examples. But essentially, that is the gist of it, is that a basic ranged person with a bow and arrow is similar to a basic ranged person with a rifle. Now, obviously, you and I know that in real life, there's a difference, but for game purposes, it's pretty much the same. And that allows me to take my Native Americans with bows, and you can take your Spaniards, with your blunderbusses or whatever. But the model abilities are where you get even more effects to cultivate your character. So your archetype starts with a set amount of stats. Let's say we both take a basic ranged. Well, both of ours are identical at that point, but then we can upgrade 2 of our stats, like save, movement, dexterity, whatever. So right then, your person is going to probably be, have different stats than me physically. And then you've got a model ability, which is 1 ability, just to keep things simple, but it's basically what you do. Are you heavily armored? Then take shielding. Do you have a big mace? Then take clobber. It's just another layer of flavor to make your basic range different from my basic ranged. And that's the gist of character creation, just in a nutshell. Now, we also have legendary traits, which can only be taken once per list, which make them wildly different. And you also have a faction trait, which is like how your army operates. You know, are they stealthy? Do they do teamwork? Are they do they use horror? That sort of thing. And
sometimes when you stack these things, you end up in situations where people would say, why would I take anything other than that? Which some people like, you know, some people like this a reward for, you know, thinking beforehand. Some people say they want to really avoid that, and they want to make sure that they maintain balance, that many people can play in different ways. So I guess you mentioned about being open beta for a long time. So is that what ironed out those kinks, you know, the little pathways that people would take? And did you find that there was lots of instances where people would say, I'm going to take that, I'm going to take that, I'm going to take that, and why would I take anything else because that one is so strong?
So no, because from the get-go, I had pretty much a lifetime of game experience, and I made essentially there's 4 core classes: melee, fast, ranged, and support. Yeah. You think of support as doing magic or issuing orders or whatever you want it to be, but essentially they buff the rest of the army. And melee is obviously the best at melee. Fast is not bad at melee, but they move faster and they're harder to be shot. They're more of your objective cappers. Then you've got your ranged, which is terrible in melee, but of course they can shoot you from afar. And then you have support, which has the lowest dex, which means it's the most susceptible to being shot. It's the easiest to be hit with a ranged attack. So if you look at that, you see that everybody has a counter to it. You know, the fast is a counter to ranged, the melee is a counter to fast, the ranged is a counter to support, and really support, you can have the biggest, strongest melee guy or monster coming at you, and there's so many debuff powers that you can use that you really, people love, like in Mass Brutality, Brutal Space, and Brutal Epic. We use a module system where you build your character, so you can essentially smash 3 of what you'd consider 3 different characters in Brutality. You can smash them together into a bigger, beefier unit. But all it takes is 1 confusion token, and they might be out of the game wandering around confused, like if you keep failing your willpower check. So I like the idea of high risk but high reward as well.
Nice.
So there's always a counter to everything.
That's cool, man. That's really interesting. How, what are the people doing on the tabletop? You mentioned objectives there, but is that the only thing? Like, so if we were facing off against each other, like what would we be doing? Why are we encountering each other?
Well, lore-wise, if that's what you mean, but I can get into that in a minute, because there's a reason why you can take any genre, etc. There's a lore reason, but the objectives, you score points with the objectives each turn, and they're very easy to score points, but if you roll, you have to roll to score the objective, and you score it on a 2 through 9, because I'm a D10 system. On a 1, depending on the region, you pick a region at the beginning of the game where you're playing, and on a 1, something bad happens to that character that's activating the objective based on the region they're in, and on a 10, something bad happens to the entire board. And that could be a wave of ghostly knights coming across the board taking souls, or it could be a flood from the river Sanguine, which is a blood river, and it takes people, or whatever. So there is still a risk with the objectives, but it's an 80% chance of scoring a point. Now, with there's also every game involves kill points for killing a model, and also objective points. So we see this a lot in my Mass Brutality game, because one of us might end up just going after the objectives, meanwhile the other one is just going after killing us for whatever reason. It just works out that way. And usually the games are pretty balanced, because scoring the objective is not a guaranteed thing. Bad things happen sometimes on a 20%. But also when you're killing units, then you're taking them off the board, which is helping your odds. And by golly, it usually pans out pretty nicely. So we don't have many blowouts.
Yeah, you mentioned lore there too. So what is the lore behind the game?
So, in a nutshell, very briefly, you're aware of all the ancient gods, like Sumerian gods, like Ishtar and Erishkigal and all of them. I'm sure you've heard of them at some point. Mine is based on Ishtar. So essentially, let me put this in a very quick nutshell. The gods are real, and the gods are an alien species that lives in the core of the earth. Okay, this is going to sound like some sort of conspiracy theory, but and part of their reproductive cycle is every millennia or whatever, they come out of the ground and they inhabit humans. And this is where the superheroes come from in my brutal epic story. They all inhabit humans as like demigods, and every other superhero that they kill, they absorb that power until that's their reproductive mode, essentially. And they're trying to kill each other and absorb more and more power. So if you've got somebody like Apollo, in Greek mythology, Apollo was like the god of the harvest and the god of light and the god of war and all these things. Well, that actually puts a pretty dark tone on it, where he killed the god of the harvest and absorbed his power. He killed the god of war and absorbed his power, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, these people become gods of like really weird things, right? Like the god of doorways and stuff like that. Well, I added context to that where he literally killed the dude and took his power. And so once they reach a level of power, they mature and they go into the ether realm, which is essentially where they mature, and that's where the gods exist. They're only here for a short time.
Was that also something that you enjoyed to do as a kid and as an adult? Is not just necessarily change rules. You mentioned changing rules for Risk. Do you also enjoy inhabiting that lore realm? Like, maybe this isn't Risk, maybe this isn't Napoleonic era, maybe this isn't Earth. Like, was the lore side and the story side just as important as the rule side?
Yeah, actually, I wasn't going to have lore at all for Brutality because it was just a rule system to use what you want. I didn't have any reason for a rule system. And then people insisted, no, you definitely have to have a rule system. You definitely have to have factions and a setting and all that. So that's when I started making it.
And how was that? Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah. I've got a creative writing background and things like that. So I even have a short story anthology that I published for Brutality. But so that's just the backstory of the gods. Ishtar is the star of Brutality, and instead of being content to no longer be worshipped and lived in the ether realm, she decided to make this pocket dimension. It's a little world. And she takes people from time and space from different dimensions and puts them here and makes them fight and, worship her and all that in her name. And so they're basically, it's like a prison planet kind of. And that's where you get your orcs versus Jedi versus whatever. And of course they've formed factions and things like that. And so that's the setting for Brutality. And then her origin story is actually explained in Brutal Epic, because that's when the spirits are coming out and making people have, fire powers and flight and invulnerability and all that. And actually all of my games are tied together. In even tangentially, they are tied together through the gods and whatnot. Nice. Even like in the case of Brutal Space, the reason why I can have Starfleet ships and you can bring X-Wings is because Ishtar does not realize that every time she pulls someone from a dimension or a time, she's ripping reality. And spacefaring people run into what's called an Inanna rift, which is Inanna is another name for Ishtar, and they get sucked into it and dropped into a common galaxy. And then so now you have all these wildly different technologies and races from different intellectual properties or whatever. And so she's not even aware that's happening, but she is related to it in that way.
Nice.
So
that's super cool. It's super interesting. I always enjoy these conversations, and I purposely don't do too much background, not because I'm lazy, but because it's like the story, like the organically occurring conversation is good. So you mentioned 8 different rule sets, right? So is 8, is your 8 and done? Is there more progression? Like, how are these? Because it seems like a living and breathing thing. Like, the environment that you've created seems like it's real. Like, you're talking to me, and I believe that it's real, that it's evolving. So how much more evolution is there? Like, what ideas have you got in the future? Where are we going with it?
Well, so Brutality Skirmish has 4-ish supplements, and those are just supplements. Like, one, you can build your own settlement, and you have to defend your own town, and you get NPC vendors to live there and all that. That's always another thing that I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you could do this? And then I make a supplement for it. I am 100% against disqualifying a customer's purchase. Like, I hate that. And remember, I'm coming from a Warhammer background where they'll just cut one of my whole armies for no reason. Yeah. And I just despise that. So I'm always 100% against disqualifying your purchase. So I have 4 rule sets right now: Brutality Skirmish, Brutal Epic, Brutal Space, and Mass Brutality. Then I also have 3 supplements, I think it's 3, for Brutality, and then the short story anthology. So that's 8 books, but it's only 4 rule sets.
Yeah.
And right now, you talk about a living, breathing thing. I'm in talks with Modiphius. I have been for a while. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah. Sure.
From the Fallout RPG and all that.
Uh-huh.
And I have painstakingly made a hex crawl, essentially, where you live in the brutal realm from Brutality Skirmish. You can make your character however you want. And I find hex crawls, I have studied hex crawls, and I love the idea of them so much, but they are extremely cumbersome and extremely granular. And I said, you know what? I can rebuild this from the ground up, and that's my thing. So instead of rolling 17 times per day, you're traveling in a typical solo RPG, I've condensed those down to usually single rolls, and you get what's essentially the result of 17 different rolls into one roll. And so I have went through and I have fleshed out every single of the 32 biomes that are in the brutal continent. And I've fleshed out all of the named settlements, what their culture's like, all the flora and fauna from every biome, every named character, every named merchant, what they offer, random merchants, nameless settlements where it's not named on the map. You just go up there and see who lives there and see what it's about. Mm-hmm. I've essentially made an MMO, but it's solo and on the tabletop. So there's no way somebody's going to do everything in a playthrough. It would take you years in real life.
Is this the project you've been talking about that's been like 30 hours a week of your life?
Yes. Yes,
so
I have.
How has that been? How have you stayed sane through this? Because when you add complexity, you've got to remember all that stuff. It's like if you are writing, novels and you're 20 deep, you've got to remember all of those other decisions and ideas and facts, so that you don't lose your thread, and you've got to have consistency. So how do you do that? How do you build and continue to build whilst also keeping consistency?
Well, a lot of it's just in my head, because Brutality, I practically live in Brutality. When you're at work and you're busy doing something mindless, your brain wanders. And a lot of the stuff I thought I had written down, and I don't. I just know it. So, I went through every single one of my books for Brutality, and every single named person that is mentioned there, you can go to the location where, like, some throwaway caption says that, this guy's a merchant in the psychotropics. Well, if you go to the psychotropics in this RPG, you can find him and buy stuff from him and do quests for him. Mm-hmm. Like, every single person that's been in any of my supplements. So I am that has helped me. A lot of throwaway captions for images I have now made real in this new game. And keeping sanity, man, it's to be honest with you, I have been done with this project mentally since April, and I'm still 30 hours a week on it. It was far larger than I realized.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
That's awesome, man. It's just so good to hear you talk. Like, it's honestly, it's invigorating. It's like when we're sitting at our paint table and we're kind of painting, sometimes, like you mentioned that, I love painting, but sometimes it does get monotonous, and I love playing games, but sometimes you kind of have a little bit of downtime. But speaking to people that are so passionate and so enthusiastic about it is really invigorating, mate. So just kind of going back to, feel free to pick out any of the game sets that you want. Are they tied together? A while ago you mentioned about injuries or damage kind of like is real time. So if one of my ships gets hit, I guess I'm going to lose systems and the ship's not going to be as effective. And also in the skirmish game, same thing. If I get hit in the leg, maybe I kind of move a little bit slower. How are those things tied into a campaign, or are they tied into a campaign? How are the games linked, and how do they progress and develop?
So they all roughly share the same campaign structure. In Brutality, only in Brutality of all the settings, when you die, you come back to life, but you remember dying, and you lose a little more of your memory of what your original life was like. So eventually, after you die so many times, you don't even remember where you come from, and now this is your world. Like, that's what Ishtar wants anyway.
Right.
So, but you actually, unless you die, when you die, you reset all your injuries in the Brutality campaign. But otherwise, you have to rest. So there's always an exploration between missions. There's a home phase in all my games, and the home phase is like repairing stuff or healing your people. So you can go explore, and you might run into something narrative. You might find items, or you might find an ally or whatever. But if you don't explore, you can rest your whole party, and you can clear their injuries.
Okay.
And it's similar in my ship game. Now the ships don't come back to life. They're just considered quote unquote wrecked, and then they will be back the next game, so you don't have to make a whole new ship.
Yeah.
But yeah, so your injuries do persist in a campaign. Between missions, your injuries persist unless you rested and you chose not to explore. So
that's cool, man.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about how it was open beta for a long time. So it's one thing kind of having your house rules written on a piece of paper and stored in your game box for your family, but it's something very different when you let that out into the wild. So how was that experience? Because you also mentioned about how people saying you should publish this. You're like, I'm not so sure about it. So how has your experience with the community been in terms of building one and its input and its its interactions with you?
I mean, to be honest with you, it's been far better than I expected. I have almost 5,000 people in my Facebook group, and to this day, I don't have any rules of conduct. And this is unheard of in a Facebook group, right? You got to say, don't be mean, don't be whatever. But my community's always been so nice. I've never had to ban anybody. Now occasionally you'll get a bot that comes in, but you ban them. But like actual living people, I've never had to tell someone to be nice. Everyone's just been nice. So I think I've been super fortunate for that. With 5,000 people, and everyone's pretty nice to each other.
Did you think there is a rhyme or reason to that, or do you think it's just a D10 roll?
A lot of it is luck, but I think this type of game attracts a certain type of person, and I think a lot of the nastier attitudes you get are from the more competitive communities, where they say this is deemed as trash and this is deemed as broken, or you start getting more opinions, and whereas my game and a lot of model agnostic games is you can do things the way you want, so there's no real right or wrong answer. Somebody can't say, hey, you're doing that wrong,
Yeah.
So yeah, and the game highly supports people kit bashing or using 3D prints or whatever. So really anything goes, and it's a pretty supportive community.
So as we kind of wind up our hour, the hour's kind of rattled by. It's always crazy how fast it goes. I kind of don't look at the clock for a little bit, and then I look at the clock like, wow, like 30 minutes have gone there. So as we kind of begin to wrap up, there's two things I'd like to talk about, if that's okay. And the first one is what do you play? Because you obviously play this. Have you got like a set faction or group that you play when you play these games, or do you bounce around different things? Like, what did you create? And what do you play now, or what do you create in the past? What has been your favorite experiences with factions or the models that you've used?
Oh, I have 5 cases of warbands for Brutality on my wall. So I probably have 100 models in those cases, and it's probably arguably 20 warbands plus. And I'll just pick something that I haven't played in a while, and I like to, you can create your stats every time you play them, but I like to write them down nice and neat in pen. And I have a big folder of just pre-made, this is what this warband is like. I don't know if it's synergistic or not. It's just who they are. And I love to look at the model when I'm statting it out and go, okay, what's he look like? Okay, he's got a shotgun. I'll make him a blaster. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I'll just pick a warband that I haven't played in a while, and then I'll grab the sheet, and I won't even remember how they're statted out because it might be 6 months since I played them. And it's great fun. I just... I enjoy having them pre-made.
And my final question before I hand it back over to you is what's been your favorite experience playing this game? Like what's happened in a game, or what's happened at a certain time and you've just been like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it is. What's been your most kind of prominent experience playing your games?
Oh, I don't know. That's hard to say. I think maybe getting children into it, because we have some younger people, 10 or under, in my gaming club, my Warhammer club, and they've all really taken to Brutality. Mm-hmm. And which I did not expect. I expected it because they started playing Warhammer, and now every week it's, hey, can we play Brutality? Can we play Brutality? And the reason why is that many of them use Lego minifigs for their warband.
Nice.
And, they can swap them out between games. They can give them a shotgun this game or a sword next game. And one kid made an army transport out of Legos for his Brutality warband.
Yeah, dude, man, that's awesome.
So especially seeing the younger generation get into it and actually embrace the creativity of it, is really like heartwarming for me. It's a nice problem, quote unquote, to have. People want to play your game every week.
Yeah, man, I'm completely on board with that. Like making a little Lego spaceship and rocking that's some next level awesome creativity stuff, right?
Yep.
So just as we begin to wind up, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about?
Not really. I would just suggest people, if they want to check out the free rules for Brutality, we have a Facebook page called Brutality Skirmish War Game. It's a group, a private group. And if there's free rules on there, or they can email me at brutalityskirmishwargame@gmail.com. And we also have a Discord. People talk about rules and stuff. And we also have a YouTube channel, Brutality Skirmish War Game. But I actually have a much larger YouTube channel where I talk tabletop and wargaming and things like that, called Let's Talk Tabletop. And I do mention Brutality, but I don't expressly talk about Brutality. It's more of like, philosophical or the community or whatever. And it skews a little more towards Warhammer, but that's just because that's the elephant in the room. So.
Mate,
but those are all the ways to get me.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's been so cool talking to you. The literally only metric that I use in the podcast is if I and we enjoyed the conversation, and I definitely have. It's been an amazing chat.
Same here.
Yeah, it's great to hear your mentality on stuff, and it's great to hear your mindset on stuff, and it's really, honestly, mate, I mentioned it a couple of times, it's really invigorating. It's like, yes, this is what the hobby should be. It's open and creative and fun and positive. So thank you for your time. We really appreciate it, and it's been a great chat.
Oh,
Maybe
thank
we'll
you
get
for
you on
having
in the
me
future
on.
to chat again.
I would love that, seriously.
There you go, episode 253, all wrapped up there. I had to hold my breath for a long time there. There's like a little metronome thing. Let me put it on the background, see if you can hear it. So that thing kind of counts me in on GarageBand, but I forgot that comes on, so I kind of took in a breath to do my woo, but then the metronome kicked in. I had to hold my breath for a long time, so you got a little bit of a unique and individual woo there. Anyway, post ramble stuff. Thanks to Scott for coming onto the show. Mentioned it in pre-show. Always interesting to speak to these creative people that not only have the ideas but have the gumption to kind of bring them to fruition and also publish them. So it was great hearing about his mentality about Brutality, and just hearing all the stuff. The lore sounds interesting, doesn't it? He spent a long time kind of fleshing out that lore and the ideas and the thinking about the gods, and the gods come and inhabit people, and then they get deposited on these certain worlds. It's pretty cool, man. Pretty good, and he just seems like a nice chap as well. Go and check out Let's Talk Tabletop too. It's always interesting to have those channels that kind of question certain things. It's a delicate balance, isn't it? When you question something, because you never want to seem like you are trying to be inflammatory just to get likes or engagements or clickbaity, but I think it's really important to question things that exist. I think that when things are questioned and when we think about if something is good or bad, I think that's when it's done in the correct way, which I believe that Scott does, it kind of makes things better or makes us figure out if that's something that we truly want. wont. So he talks about a lot of things that occur to him, a lot of things that are interesting to him. He talks about pricing, for example. That's something that he talks about. He also talks about, are certain things overrated, or just general kind of things that occur to him that, he thinks, is this a good thing? He talks about 3D printing. Is 3D printing a good or a bad thing? So, if you're interested in those sorts of things, go and check out Let's Talk Tabletop, because, it's just, even if you don't agree, that's something that's really, really important. People talk about free speech a lot, don't they? And that's a delicate subject in this day and age. It's like, just because free speech doesn't necessarily mean that you should say anything that occurs to you. That's not really what it is. There needs to be a filter in front of that, and just because I could literally say anything doesn't mean that I should. That's not really what free speech is. But what I get from watching Scott's YouTube channel is that it's an exercise of free speech, and we could watch it and we don't necessarily have to agree with that. And I'm not saying that I don't. I'm just giving some examples, and I equally, if I don't agree, I don't necessarily need to engage in the comments about that. And I think that it's great to have channels like his where people feel that they have the ability to share those thoughts and put it out for the rest of us, and just it's food for thought. It's really, really good. So it's great to have someone with that mentality that's not only creating content for YouTube that we can reflect on certain things that exist, but also to take that mentality into rule sets. And I think that drives a lot of his rule set stuff, doesn't it? That kind of came through in the show, where it's like, I change the rules for this game, and this is how I think that it should be, and this is what I want to see in games, and I don't believe that is fun, so then I made this. It's really cool, to see someone that's not just gonna conform to stuff that exists. We talked about that briefly in the show. We talked about conformity, where I think the world would have us in some ways just conform. I think the right to repair, we didn't talk about the right to repair too much in today's show, but I think I've talked about it recently, where I believe that we should have the right to repair our stuff, and things should be created with the intent to be repaired. If we take a toaster, for example, it's a very simple item, and I think they should make it very simple. I think they should make it very robust, and I think they should make a toaster to last forever. And if it doesn't last forever, they should make it really easy to swap out parts and things like that. And I don't necessarily see that the world that we live in terms of planned obsolescence, where we're buying a whole bunch of things that they are planned to be obsolete. They are designed to become obsolete. They are designed to maybe potentially fail, because they don't want you to buy a sitting chair that'll last forever and for generations necessarily. They want to buy one which might fail, so that you then buy another sitting chair. So you've got a customer for life, as opposed to having a customer one time, So I'm not having a go at anybody, and I'm not kind of, hating on like the world or something. But I think that mentality comes through with Scott, doesn't it? It's like kind of questioning why things are, changing things to the way that he sees fit. And if he's changed things to the way that he sees fit and you enjoy that, then Brutality would be the game for you, But yeah, there you go, man. I don't know. It's just a pretty interesting thing. And for somebody else to kind of have those conversations, it kind of, I think we should have more of them. And I think that we should have more of that discourse and more of those conversations to kind of really figure out if how things are is the best way to be, and question those things with maturity and a level-headedness. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so there you go. That's a little bit of a chat. The post-ramble chat there. Maybe it's a value. I don't know. But there you go. Hobby stuff. I'm back in at home, back at the place where I reside when I work. So back to painting a big batch. I whinged and moaned about painting 36 guys in one go, but guess what I'm doing? Straight back to it. Painting 36 guys back to back. So I'm painting 3 units of Rose Knights, 1 unit for me and 2 for the chap who we have our little agreement. He sends me some models, I paint them up and send most of them back to him, but then I keep a set for me. I don't know if I'm going to agree in the future to do 2 units for him and 1 for me. And I'm not really a big fan of 36 is too much. 24 is okay, and that's all right. 50% for me, 50% to him. But 3 units, 2 units for him. It's just a little bit too much. 36 guys in one go. It doesn't inspire me to paint to my best level. Painting 12 for me, just as I left, I was painting some House Greyjoy guys from A Song of Ice and Fire, and just 12 guys was awesome, because I was like, oh, look at the amount of time I've got. I got so much time for these 12. I found that I was spending the same amount of time when I was painting 24, when I was painting 12, but obviously when you paint in 12, you've got significantly more time to spend on that. So, yeah, so 36 I think is too much on reflection, so I think I'll take it down to 24. But it's nice to try different things. I tried it, I said yes, because they didn't seem too difficult to paint, and not too difficult to paint, and they're really nice minis, but 36 is just a little bit too much, I think, so 24 would be my limit. Back on an audio book too, I'm listening to, I'm not sure if it's a new book. The thing is with like Kindles and audio books and not having the physical book is that you forget certain things, so I don't know when the book was released. I think it's fairly recently, but I'm listening to a Joe Abercrombie book. If you've not read or listened to Joe Abercrombie, I really do enjoy his kind of low fantasy world that he creates. Not sure if this one is low fantasy or whether it kind of goes into middle or high fantasy, but there's a book called The Devils, which is pretty interesting. It's different to other Joe Abercrombie books in the sense of it seems a little bit more, not necessarily jovial, but he's quite a funny guy, and that comes out in some of his books at certain times, but he's definitely leaning more into that. In this one, The Devils, it's basically a kind of parallel universe, kind of Black Plague, not really medieval time, but that kind of era, maybe like kind of 1400s, 1500s, that kind of time, and like a parallel universe, so elves exist and lots of fantastic beasts like werewolves and things like that exist, and it's about, but the kind of the church, the Christian church after a fashion still exists, and then it's about a bunch of people, a little bit like the A-Team, I guess, or like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, kind of similar tropes to that. There's a kind of like a bunch of people who wouldn't necessarily hang out with each other too much, thrust together into a band, trying to complete a mission, which maybe wouldn't be one that they would so choose. So listen to the audio book for that, and it's really good. The narrator, who I'm really sorry, Mr. Narrator, I can't remember your name. I actually looked it up yesterday so I could mention it in the post ramble, but I've forgotten it. But the narrator does a really, really good job on the audio book. The amount of accents that he's got and the consistency with his accents for all the different characters is pretty cool. It's pretty special. Stephen Percival, I want to say. In fact, I'm going to break from tradition and I'm going to pause it because the guy needs some shouting out. So I'm going to go and check his name and I'm going to come back to you in a second. Wait out. Yo! Okay, so I checked. So it's Stephen Pacey. I'm not going to go back and listen, but I think I wasn't too far away. I think I got his initials right. I think I said SP. But anyway, yeah, so Stephen Pacey. He did a great job. He's done an awesome job with the audiobook. I wouldn't say it's my favourite Joe Abercrombie book, but it's definitely it's definitely worth a listen. I use Audible. So if you got any other audiobook formats that are kind of like Audible but maybe better value or cheaper, I kind of subscribe to Audible flirtatiously. I kind of, you get like a cheap offer for a few months. I think it's like maybe $3.99 or maybe a little bit less for kind of 3 months. You sign up for it then, but then when it gets to the full price, when it's like £8 a month, it seems a lot. I don't know, maybe if you listen to like loads of audiobooks where you get like 1 credit a month, I think, for like $7.99. I don't know if that's good value. I know audiobooks take a whole bunch more of time and maybe investment to make. But so if you listen to audiobooks and you've got a good way that's not pirating, I don't want to pirate stuff. I don't think that's really cool. I want to make sure that artists get paid for their work and their graft. They work really, really hard. So if you got a way to listen to audiobooks that maybe is a little bit more economical, something I can maintain a subscription for a longer time, instead of just doing the kind of 3-month deal and then not doing anything for ages and then 3-month deal again with Audible, then let me know. I'd be interested to know. So yeah, it's good to be back at the hobby desk. It's great to be hobbying once more. I invested I invested in my hobby stuff for the year. I mentioned in the last show that I was thinking about getting involved in rounding out my list for the Walking Dead All Out War. So I did that. So I took the dive. So I rounded out my entire collection for the Walking Dead All Out War now, which is good. So I've got that all stacked up, ready to go. I also got The Last War. Speaking to Will Rahman Daughtry a while ago, just really inspired me to get involved in one of his games. It's very difficult which one to choose, but War Games Atlantic do a little box set for The Last War. So it's got the rule book, it's got tokens, and it's got a smattering of minis from different nations. I think that's what swung it for me. So it's got like some Russian guys, some German guys, and some Brit guys, but they also do box sets which has got more World War I soldiers. So I wanted to get involved in The Last War to support Will's work. I also think it's an interesting game that I want to play. But there's also a couple of other World War I rule sets that I'd like to get involved with. And then I also bought some more Walking Dead All Out War guys, so I can play the Walking Dead All Out War because I think it's a great game. But I can maybe take another look at Last Days, which is another zombie apocalyptic game that I really like. But then also Will Rahman Daughtry has just done his Hope is for the Dead, so there's another kind of zombie game that I can potentially get some value out of. I think I mentioned before about Terrain Crate from Mantic. I got that a good while ago, so I've got a whole bunch of post-apocalyptic terrain, such as like a kind of campsite and different shops and different things and that. So yeah, I'm gonna make sure that I start painting up that stuff between my Song of Ice and Fire stuff. Got a game lined up for next Saturday for a Song of Ice and Fire, so it's straight back into it. Not sure which faction I'm going to play, whether I'm going to start playing with my Greyjoys, which is a faction that I chose and bought myself, or whether I'm going to keep on just playing with Baratheons, just because that's what I'm painting up right now. Not sure, not decided yet. But anyway, but there you go, man. You're getting some good value out of this, eh? You're getting some good post-ramble ramblage. But let me know what you're up to. Let me know your buying habits too. Interaction is what it's all about. You know, it's not a me thing. Like I want all these people queuing up to interact with me. It's not that. It's just I want to know what you're up to. What's your policy on buying stuff? How do you buy stuff? I buy stuff, try to buy stuff at the start of the year, or like, you know, I would try and buy stuff at one specific point and then say, right, that's me, and then try and not really buy anything else during the hobby year. But how do you buy stuff? Do you give, in the past, I think I've had like a monthly amount, and then kind of like added things kind of each month, you know, as I get a certain hobby amount. But I've kind of moved away from that just naturally over the last couple of years, and tend to buy stuff like one time. I'll be like, right, what do I want? And I'll have a whole bunch of stuff in a shopping cart or a whole bunch of stuff in a list. And then I'll just kind of like at one time in the year, I'll just be like, right, I'm going to buy this, and leave it alone. That seems to be working really well. But what do you do? What's on your hobby desk? How do you organize things? I'd be interested to know. And because it's just, you know, about sharing and interacting. So anyway, that's enough of the post-ramble rumble. You've got a good little chunk of time there, but that was just stuff that naturally occurred to me as I was kind of like pressed record and held my breath for my woo. Hope all is well. I hope you're keeping yourself on an even keel. I hope that your family is good, whatever it is you're up to and wherever you are in the world. Yeah, that's enough of the that's enough of the post ramble. Until next time we're together, keep painting.